Greetings and welcome to Enigmatic. I know I'm back super soon. It's nice, isn't it? I'm going to go on a little bit of a diatribe. I said in my last video I would talk about judgment at some point, and I just listened to this video by Cell EST, who is a tattoo artist, and she does tattoo content on YouTube. She has just a lot of fun content, and I don't consider myself heavily tattooed, but most people consider me heavily tattooed, so I'm a heavily tattooed person. And the video I just listened to, it just makes me laugh at people. And it's why I think people are kind of vapid and insipid and just lemmings that are following the trend. But the video she posted today was about a woman that got face tattoos, and now everybody's calling her a bad mom. Like, what? Shouldn't the judgment about whether she's a good mom or a bad mom be more about how she's raising her child and what she's teaching her child and what she does for her child, um, not what she looks like? I mean, it really just goes back to this discrimination we have about how people look. And that kind of discrimination is a type of judgment. And it's not a good discernment. It's something that I've noticed, a lot in my life. There was one time at one of the jobs that I work at. These guys were looking over resumes trying to find somebody to hire, and they made a comment about one girl being attractive and having a nice backside, and so she'd be great to look at. And so she ended up getting more consideration because of how she looked, which is a nod to what can be called pretty privilege. The more attractive, quote unquote, somebody is based on a certain societal standard, the more likely they are to have people give them what they need and give them what they want and acquiesce to their requests. Um, and I mean, like I said yesterday, I try not to judge people and be mean to them or hard on them based on what I think about their thinking, because I don't know if they can necessarily help it. This is a great example because with pretty privilege, it's actually a cognitive bias. And so, by definition, it's something that is going on in somebody's subconscious. But that doesn't negate the fact that how somebody looks, unless the job that they're going for requires them to look a certain way, like modeling, how somebody looks doesn't dictate anything about how they perform a job. So it shouldn't be a consideration in hiring that person for a job. How somebody looks doesn't dictate whether or not they will be a good or bad person or bad parent. So having tattoos on your face doesn't inherently make you a bad mom. I mean, tattoos for women are already kind of a sticky situation anyway because of double standards. Um, there's a lot of men that will make an objective statement about tattoos being ugly on women, which is just their preconceived notions of what they prefer a woman to be like and look like. And they don't know how to acknowledge that it's their preconceived notions. And that it kind of comes to an inflection point when we're talking about judgment overall, is that oftentimes when a person casts judgment on another person, whether that person has tattoos on their face, if they're obese, if they're of a certain race, if they're short, if they're tall, it's all because of preconceived notions and not being able to change their mind when new information comes in, and to also notice the faults of those preconceived notions. Um, as a heavily tattooed person, I know lots of people that are heavily tattooed, and I know lots of people that are not heavily tattooed. I can tell you, hands down, that it doesn't matter what somebody looks like, whether they have tattoos or not. It doesn't dictate the likelihood of them being a shithead or not. I know plenty of shitheads that have lots of tattoos. I know plenty of shitheads that don't have any tattoos. Um, so it's bad logic. That's just what it is. People are taking in a certain amount of information. They're reacting to it emotionally. Then they have an emotional interpretation, and then they draw faulty conclusions based on that. And it's making the world a shittier place. If we look at religion or politics and how people are ready to die on the hill that they stand on, there's something funny that people don't realize. You know, If you were born somewhere else, your values would probably be different. For people that want to be, that want to try to shove Christianity down another person's throat in this country, it's like, well, if you were born in India, you probably won't know too much about Christianity. So, how can you say that that's a ubiquitous truth when it seems geographically biased? I can't wrap my head around it. And that's not to say that people shouldn't practice religions, but when you're trying to say that something is more right than something else, you have to be able to kind of justify that. And when it comes to things like religion and politics, it's kind of up in the air. One of the things that encourages a culture to think the way it does is the environment that the culture is in. And so you put people in a different environment, they think different things. So while we like to think that we are approaching things in an objective way, we're not. We're just not. I mean, to be honest, in my philosophical scope, I don't think that we ever have anything objective. I don't think that we have an objective truth. I wouldn't even say that that is an objective truth. What we have is an attempt towards objectivity for the greatest statistical probability towards being right on what we think the truth is. But a lot of people aren't necessarily thinking like this, and so therefore we have overwrought judgments that are ultimately meaningless about things that don't matter. If a guy paints his nails, doesn't really matter. But you have plenty of men out there who be like, "Oh, he's not a real man." What the fuck does that even mean? Like, what does that even mean? Yeah, I don't fit a certain paradigm of behavior that you say I should fit. Like, you, I really don't get it. Um, who's to say that there is a schema aside from having a Y chromosome and a penis and certain other, endocrine system factors that make me male, that makes me a man? And I mean, this just kind of makes me think about the confusion that there seems to be, and also the judgments about people, whether they're cisgendered or transgendered, and whether they're straight or they're gay or they're bi. No matter where you are on the spectrum, because they're all spectrums, you're kind of vilified at this point, because you have so many different groups that are trying to fire back. So like right now, it's really hard to be a white male or straight male in this country. Because being a straight white male, you're assumed to be a bigot even if you're not. So that's why, like, no matter where you are on the spectrum, it's hard right now, and it's not okay. It's really not okay. But when people try to force other people to fit a certain type of model that they think is quote unquote right, when things are kind of floating castles in the sky, then you're going to have dissent. You're going to have people butting heads. And I apologize, I did have a grander point that I wanted to make and I lost it a little bit. But my point is that there's a lot of people that cast these kinds of judgments about other people, but then would be insulted or upset or offended when somebody casts the same type of judgment upon them. And that's hypocritical. Like, don't dish it out if you can't take it. And we're not conditioned to take negative judgment. We are conditioned to see that affects us in some way or other, whether it's like survival, or to get by in life and make friends and have connections that are fulfilling in our lives. When we cast these judgments, that affects people. And you have people out there that try to say like, oh, you can't let what other people think affect you and this, that, and the other. That's the thing. It does affect you, even if you think it's not affecting you. It's entering your mind. Your mind does something with that information, and a lot of times what it does with that information, especially if somebody's in denial about how they feel about what other people say, it happens in the subconscious, and so people aren't really that aware of what's going on in their own minds. So yeah, it was just like I said, that video just made me laugh because there's a lot of comments that Cell read from people that were online, which that's another thing that's funny to me, is how everybody is so brazen on the internet with their really, really bad logic, reasoning, and rationale. It's just everybody is a know-it-all, but you can just tell by certain responses that there's very little self-reflection, and in that lack of self-reflection, there's also a lack of self-control. And that's why people are just popping off on social media all the time and can't control their fingers as much as them controlling their fingers is as hard as them controlling their mouths. Like now people are like having spontaneous utterances with their fucking thumbs. It's not how that should work. If you think of something and you just say it, that's a little bit different than how you have to type it out. And while you're typing it out, you have more time to consider if you should say what you're going to say or not. So this is why, like, I feel like it's it's people more and more just choosing not to think before they speak or before they type in this instance, and everybody needs to be heard without hearing. Everybody's got a voice on social media, and that's the other thing. Nobody can admit when they're wrong or when they might have been off or when they might have jumped the gun. Everybody's just gonna like die on the hill that they started on, you know. And it's like if we're gonna keep behaving this way, then as a culture, we're just gonna become more and more fractured over time. Um, because we're not looking at the big picture and we can't get over ourselves and how we feel about the world and how we think the world should be and how we think things should be. You know, it's just interesting to me to spectate on the criticisms that people have without understanding a situation. I think a really good example is construction, like road work. A lot of people complain about road work, and it is an inconvenience, and so I'm not knocking on them for that. But what I don't understand is when people say, like, well, it's stupid that they're doing it this way, or it's stupid that they're doing it that way. And I can't help myself. I often will ask people, I'm like, what do you know about construction? Because I personally don't know anything about construction, so I'm not going to say whether how they're doing something is right or wrong. I might say like I don't understand why they're doing it this way when it seems like this other way might be more effective. But notice the difference in like how I said it. This is dumb. Well, they shouldn't be doing it this way. Versus I don't understand why they're doing it this way. I think it should be done this other way. Like one acknowledges the limit of the person making the observation. The other one is just a know-it-all. And I'm sorry, but if you don't know anything about construction, how can you really critique about how they're doing roadwork and the operations that they choose to use when they choose to use them? Makes no sense to me. Um, so, and there was like another point that I wanted to make while I was on that little bit of the diatribe, and it just kind of escaped me right now. Oh, that's what it was. The other thing that's interesting is how people um, state their opinions. So there's been something that's been observed and studied where if somebody says something with a great deal of conviction, people are more likely to believe what that person says, even if it is completely off base and sounds asinine. Like if you say it convincing enough, people will believe you. And so when people share their opinions, I feel like there's this subtle manipulation where people say things with conviction, but not only that, they also try to frame it objectively. So like there's two different statements. There's two differences between these two statements I'm going to use. That song is shit versus I think that song is shitty. One statement makes it seem like it's incontrovertible, and it almost implies that I think that other people should feel the same way about the song that I do. Whereas the other one is acknowledging the up in the air nature of such an opinion. A song being good or bad is kind of up to chance, and there's been studies to show this because there's also been studies to show that people don't know what they want and they don't know what they really like. Oftentimes, they'll take other things into consideration that have nothing to do with the situation at hand in order to make a choice. So, for example, the more people that like something, the more people that start to like it. That's one thing that's been shown. Um, Another example, and I'll get into this one a little bit more, is they did a study where they brought in these participants for a wine survey, and they gave them, I think it was 5 different wines, and they told them the price of all the wines. But what they did not tell them was that the first wine and the fifth wine were actually the same exact price. And in the first time they did the survey, everybody chose the most expensive wine, I believe, as the one that was their favorite. So they brought all the same participants back a second time and had them taste 5 wines. And this time they didn't tell them any of the prices of the wine. And in this instance, the second cheapest wine was actually the one that was favored the most. So people don't know what's going on, and they don't know what's going on in their own minds. They like to think they do. They like to act like they do, but they don't. And so that's why, you know, noticing the nature of statements is really really important to me. When somebody says like that's bad, I kind of wonder like what makes it objectively bad, or bad in the sense that you have to state it as though it's a fact, or not an opinion, or not part of your phenomenology that something is bad. Because I mean, it really what it makes me think of is a lot of Socrates. There's a lot of dialogues that Plato expounds, um, of Socrates kind of trying to get people to define things, and where you end up seeing that the defining characteristics of things are very mercurial and are kind of moving goalposts. And so certain things that we want to define are really really hard: justice, love, beauty, things like that. And so that's another reason why there's a lot of opinions out there that are just empty to me, because they don't notice the difficulty in defining some of the things that they're talking about. And so then we can also put good and bad into that category as well. And what I think people mean oftentimes when they talk about good and bad is that it's not favorable to them, their scruples, their preferences, or their sensibilities. And those are things that can always change. So it means little to me. But yeah, I share this, and like, it's funny. I'm sitting here kind of upset that people are talking shit, and then I'm talking shit. But I'm talking shit about people talking shit because they're kind of the issue in my opinion, and so I want to address that, and I want to address them, and I want to address that kind of behavior. So yeah, I'm talking shit. I'm on a diatribe right now. And I don't really feel like I've been like cruel or mean or anything like that. I'm just saying how things appear to me and saying that people need to think more. Um, I can see how people might be insulted by that, and I say that because I've been told, very often in my life that I think too much. But at this point in my life, when somebody tells me that, I'm typically one to tell them, no, you just think too little. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed just me popping off about random shit again. Be good to you, be good to others. Lots of love. Give me a like, give me a subscribe. Feel free to comment, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you so much.